Hi everybody, this is Dr. Amy back here. Today's topic is going to be epithelial tissue, and I have created an entire handout that you can find in the links below. It is totally free. You can download it through Teachers Pay Teachers. It is mostly blank, so you can use this as a learning opportunity if you're a student or if you're a teacher. You can certainly use this for your classroom. Okay, so epithelium, comes in a lot of different forms. So when we look at epithelium, there's some commonalities amongst them. And the first term you should understand are these two here on the left, which refer to the apical side or the basement membrane. And as tissue is attached, one side remains relatively free or open, which is the apical side, and the other side has a clear defining bottom, set of tissues that we refer to as the basement membrane. So it is a point of attachment, for those tissues. Okay, when we name tissues, let's go over the terminology, because once you know essentially the 6 major terms, you'll be able to sort of identify the appearance of any of the major tissues. And the first set of terms that you will see, falls here right in this layers box. And generally, those first terms will either come in simple, which refers to there is only one layer of that particular type of cell. It is stratified, meaning it has 2 or more layers, and generally it's more. Or there is pseudostratified, which refers to being false, so it's only one layer, but it happens to look like 2. All right, the second term in the type of tissue is going to be something here in the shapes box. All right, if it is a squamous shape, it means it is very flat. I have seen it described plate-like, smushed, right, but very thin, in nature. The other two are more obvious, right? Cuboidal is obviously a cube shape, so more square. And columnar is going to be tall and nice and thin in shape. Okay, so now that we have a handle on some basic terminology, let's take a look at each of the different tissue types. Okay, now let's discuss specific tissue types. All right, our first type of epithelial tissue is simple squamous. And of course, the appearance, like we just talked about, is a single layer from the simple, flat plate-like cells from the squamous. All right, common locations include things like capillaries in the alveoli of the lungs, so the inner portion of the lungs. And its function really, because it is so thin, and so flat, it allows lots of things, particularly things like oxygen, to go back and forth at these locations. So that is a huge function of simple squamous. Let's take a peek at what it appears like underneath a microscope. Okay, so here's our microscopic view, and you can see that there's a lot of white space here, right? That's a blood vessel. All right, but all this nice little purple, right, tissue is a layer of simple squamous. So you can see when I say it's thin and plate-like, it is very, very thin, and you can see how easily it would be for oxygen and other things to sort of sneak back and forth in between this very small layer of cells, which is its basic function. Okay, next we're at the simple cuboidal type of epithelium. And again, you should be able to fill in the appearance of this one. It is a single layer, right, simple, of cube-shaped cells. So you can see they're much more square, in appearance. And when you look at them microscopically, it's going to look like they're much larger nuclei, almost right towards the center. All right, most common location for simple cuboidal are places like the kidneys and glands. All right, their functions really are twofold. One is absorption, right? The other, even more important, would be secretion, of objects, which is obviously what happens at those two locations. So let's take a quick peek underneath the microscope at what that simple cuboidal type of cell, appears like. Okay, so here on the left-hand side, you can see it's more that cartoon version, but again, here's our basement membrane along the bottom. You can see simple cube-shaped. They're definitely not as flat, as that squamous. The nuclei tend to sit dead center if you're looking for them underneath the microscope. Okay, over here we're looking at our ducts. You can see that these are circular ducts, each one of these. And surrounding each one of these ducts, are nice cube-shaped cells with very large nuclei in the center, and it is only one layer thick. There's a nice little lumen there, right? That's connective tissue in that nice dark purple. So it's in a nice circular format, but it's only one layer thick. So it still allows for some movement, just like our simple squamous did. Obviously, it's more discerning because of the thickness of the cell. Okay, next is our simple columnar. And of course, the appearance here is going to be just like we talked about. Simple referring to one layer of cells. Columnar, in this case, are going to be nice and tall. Now, simple columnar comes one of two versions, ciliated or non-ciliated. So you can see here on this left-hand side, right, there's no cilia. And here on this right-hand side, you've got these little hairs that sort of project off the end of these cells. And cilia are simply hairs, and they allow for movement. Okay, also in columnar type cells, you see this additional cell. Okay, these nice little blobs here. And what these little guys are goblet cells. And goblet cells are extremely important, which is part of their function, in that they create mucus. All right, and it's exactly the mucus that you're thinking of. Nobody loves it. However, it is extremely important, right? It does help to trap particles so that they do not get further inside of our body. So it does trap and hold, right? Those cilia, in addition, okay, whether they're on this type of simple columnar or one of the future ones we're going to talk about, helps to move objects, okay, forward along their projection. Okay, locations here are places like the uterine tubes and digestive tract, okay, for these. All right, so you can see that clearly along the uterine tube, you're going to want that cilia, right, to move that ovum forward. Okay, mucus is fantastic inside digestive, right, to make sure that we're trapping particles that should not get further through the tract. All right, so let's take a quick peek underneath the microscope at what this type of slide looks like. All right, and here's our microscopic view. So let me kind of point out some things that we're looking at. Number one, we're really only looking at the cells that are up towards this top wavy portion here. The rest of this is different types of other tissue, connective tissue, and other. Okay, so we're really just looking at this top portion. This darker component down at the bottom contains the nuclei of these cells, so they tend to line up very much down towards the bottom of that tall column. Okay, and it's that attachment to that basement membrane, so it kind of sticks out nice and far. And you can see the depth from where that basement membrane is all the way out. Okay, it's pretty wide and deep, and each of those cells, right, are nice and thin. Okay, so very tall, singular shaped, right, to allow for a lot of that mucus production. Okay, next up is kind of a tricky one. This one is pseudostratified, ciliated columnar. Okay, so appearance should be relatively straightforward at this point. Okay, we did talk pseudostratified, meaning that it looked like it was two layers. However, in reality, it is only one layer thick. And when you look at it underneath the microscopic view, it'll become apparent why it doesn't look like a simple columnar and why we give it a different name. All right, most pseudostratified columnar comes ciliated, so you see those nice little hairs. They will also contain those nice little goblet cells that help us, again, to produce mucus. All right, pseudostratified ciliated columnar cells are found primarily in the respiratory system. So nasal cavity, pharynx, upper trachea, right, all the way down into even upper bronchi. All right, this is kind of important because we do not want particles to reach all the way down into our lungs and then to get through that simple squamous tissue and into our body and bloodstream. All right, so here this mucus plays a big role in trapping foreign particles, and cilia plays a nice big role in pushing those particles back, okay, in the outward direction. So while mucus does seem inconvenient at times, right, think of when you're outdoors, it is hay fever season, and you've got all of this pollen that you are breathing in, and all of a sudden you're producing a crazy amount of mucus. Well, that's your body's natural reaction, so that we don't get that pollen all the way into the body, that the extra mucus is being produced to help trap that. Now, of course, there's a normal amount, and we can address some abnormal or excess production of mucus in the future, but let's take a look at this underneath the microscope slide. All right, for starters, I have labeled this slide PSCC, which is the abbreviation for pseudostratified ciliated columnar. Okay, you can see why most of us just go with the PSCC, all right, designation. So what we're looking at here is this top layer of cells, okay, just towards this top, right? This is more connective tissue and some other, and you can see some cartilage at the bottom. But it's this darker layer. Okay, you can see off the top end, the apical end, that you've got all these little hair-like projections that are sort of tilted. Those, of course, are your cilia. And the reason we refer to this as pseudostratified versus a simple, even though they are actually one layer, is that unlike our last photo where all of those nice little nuclei lined up down towards the bottom of those column-shaped cells, okay, this one, the nuclei are sort of all over the place, right? They're found all over depending on which cell you're looking at. So it gives us this very false appearance, okay, of having many layers. But when you look at it in reality, and if you were to get even closer, right, it's really just one layer thick and it's all attached to this nice little basement membrane down here at the bottom. Okay, next up is our stratified squamous. And while the squamous portion remains the same, they're going to be flat, plate-like, thin, pancake-like cells, so they're very thin cells. Now we're stratified. So now we're talking 2+ layers, and I know I've just drawn 3 here, but the reality is there's going to be way more than 3. All right, you're going to find these types of stratified squamous cells in places like the skin, right, the epidermis, the mouth, the vagina, the anus, okay? And here when we think about the function, because of the multiple layers that are involved, okay, it is not a problem to lose part of this outer layer. New cells will be created down towards the bottom and push their way up, okay? And we're offering a lot more protection because of these multiple layers. So let's take a peek at the slide. Okay, so stratified squamous, okay, ends here. This is our basement membrane where I'm tracing out right here, so towards this bottom portion. And everything above it is part of that stratified squamous layer. So they are very flat, thin-like, plate-like layers of cells, but there's a ton of them, right? So this happens to be the skin. We are creating new cells up towards the bottom and pushing them out. And the cells here towards the outer edge, okay, can simply be lost without any issue because we've got plenty more layers where that came from. Okay, so these are the types of cells that you do want facing the outside world. Okay, next up we have stratified cuboidal, and just like the terminology from back at the beginning says, it is multiple layers of cube-shaped cells. And here I've left this one over here with a you draw here blank. Okay, so as I draw, I will talk about some of the other components. Okay, so again, right, our cuboidal is good for absorption and secretion. This one really isn't much different, except that now we've got some extra, right, layers associated with it. Okay, you can draw in some nice little nuclei here. Let your students be nice and creative. Break out some colored pencils. Okay, so primary location for stratified cuboidal is glands, right? So think sweat glands, saliva glands, right? We're secreting stuff. We just need more layers here. Okay, I do not have a microscopic picture of this one, okay, but it looks like you would imagine it would look. All right, next up is our stratified columnar. So again, stratified, more than one layer. Columnar, tall, column-shaped cells. We've got these nice little goblets here again, very mucus producing. This one, I'm not going to show you in the microscope slide either. There's really only one location, which happens to be the male urethra. Okay, so it's a pretty unique type of tissue. All right, we do have one left, our transitional epithelium. Let's take a look at our last type of tissue. Okay, so transitional is one that we haven't seen a term for yet. Okay, it has a very unique location to the urinary system. So a little bit in the ureters, a lot in the bladder. And its big function is to be distensible. Okay, distensible means that it's able to change shape. So if the bladder has a lot of urine in it, right, the cells are able to flatten out a little bit. And if the bladder is relatively empty, those cells can be nice and tall. Okay, the appearance is going to be a tough one to describe, so let's take a peek at what the appearance looks like, and then you can simply draw in what you see over here. Okay, so here is our transitional epithelium, and you can see, right, all of this lighter purple things with nuclei representing each cell here, okay, don't look like any of the other 3 shapes. They're not flat, they're not cubed, they're not tall and columnar. Okay, because they are sort of all odd-shaped, this allows them to stretch out, shrink down, okay, and move as needed, which is what defines a transitional type of epithelium. Okay, hope this was helpful. Put any questions, comments, others in the comments below. Feel free to share this video. Okay, have a great day, guys. We'll see you next week.